What's up, everybody? This is the Rabid Hedgehog, and this is going to be the talk about dealerships and how to deal with them and some of the things about them since I've been on the inside and seen it from all directions, basically. So when it comes to going to a dealership, a lot of people always call them the dealership or have bad notions for them, and that is the case with some of them, not all. There's some very good mom and pop shops out there that still do business a good way and actually will tell you legit things, you know. In fact, yesterday I witnessed that when I was out with a friend shopping for a motorcycle, and they literally told them, hey, if you're going to sell your motorcycle to us, we're going to have to, you know, buy it at wholesale, and this is not necessarily the best way to go. And that's actually pretty legit business practice right there when they actually literally say you're not going to get the most money this way. They're actually trying to help out or give you advice. So that's kind of the dealerships I like to deal with. I know them around here, and that's a good thing. But we're going to talk about some of the practices and some of the things about the bad ones, and also some that both sides have to do, because each dealer has to have a cost of operation, because it does cost money to run a dealership as well. So that's where you start with the fees, which we'll get into here right now. So the most common fees that you actually see on your buyer's orders and things like that are fees such as the freight and prep, and also documentation and some other charges as well. And in all technicality, there should only be two types of fees. There should be the freight prep and the documentation. Now, not all dealerships do the documentation fee, and that actually is a law here in Oklahoma. I'm not sure about everybody else, but in Oklahoma, if a dealership doesn't charge their first patron a dealership fee for documentation, then they can never charge it at all. So some don't have that fee. Some of the fees differ from each other because each company, it depends on who they use and how they do it. Because what the documentation fee truly is actually the dealership working on your behalf to do a lot of different things, and also because they bought a motorcycle from you or other Powersport product that they actually still have to pay taxes on and get the thing in their name so they can properly sell it. So they're paying for the power of attorney fees to go register the vehicle and do everything on the back end that you don't see, and they have to pay overhead. They have to pay a title clerk or somebody in the background, and that's where that fee comes from. Now, those fees are going to be different per dealership. Some of them have them set for $50. Some of them have them set for $200. And that's where some of the issues lie, because there shouldn't be exuberant fees. I mean, if you're looking at a documentation fee that's well over $200, then there might be something built in there that you don't necessarily want. And that's an issue too. So when you look at those documentation fees, just ask them, what is that for? And that's exactly what they're going to tell you. It's to do the stuff in the background legally so that they have the ability to sell your motorcycle, to register it, and to pay taxes, because they don't know how long it's going to sit on their lot. And to be honest, they pay taxes on inventory because that's seen as income for them. So that's what that exists for. It's not a I gotcha fee. Some of them are exuberant for other reasons, and like I said, it's hard to tell what is good and what is bad out there because each state is different. In Oklahoma, if it's anything really over 200, then it's probably too much because it doesn't cost that much to do that. So that's something to ask about, and that's something you can negotiate, of course, when you're negotiating the price of the car, because everybody who says I don't pay fees is lying. I'm sorry to say that, because the dealer is working their fees in everywhere else, because there's legalities to some of these things, especially the freight charge. Freight charges are actually required because, let's face it, you can't get a motorcycle or car or anything across the country without a train or a truck or something carrying it for you, and you're not going to get that for free. Nobody is going to put that thing on a truck or on a ship or anywhere without charging you something. So the freight does exist for a reason, and it's actually a mandate, and it's actually something that is regulated. All freight charges actually should be the same, no matter where you are. So when you go to a dealership, and a lot of these places actually disclose the freight charge, they need to match up with everybody else's freight charge because it's a normalized across the whole nation. And that's actually a federal thing. So when you go in and they show freight charge, you'll see like $800 and some. You better go down the street and see the same charge at the similar dealership. So if it's a Harley, they better have the same charges across the board, because that is the same charge no matter if it's across the street from the factory or 3,000 miles away. Now, if you're seeing charges that are inappropriate, now that's something you can pick up on, because many different websites, I'll show you a screenshot of Harley Davidson's website and maybe a couple of others, disclose the freight and handling charge to the customer on their website. And that's because it's supposed to be the same. So if you're looking at this thing and you notice that this dealership's charging $1,500 for freight and this one's charging $893, then you know somebody's doing something wrong here and padding their numbers, which that's messed up. So you want to look into that. See if the actual manufacturer is disclosing their freight charge and stuff like that, because of the fact that that is regulated and should be normalized. So that's one that they can catch you on if you don't know that. The next one is prep. Now, prep is something that depends on the motorcycle itself, because each motorcycle has a different prep time. Some motorcycles come fully assembled, they're missing the maxi fuse and a tank of gas, and that's literally it. So they literally just stick the fuse in there, they may upright the handlebars a smidge, tighten everything down, put gas in it, ride around for a mile, and they're done. And that's literally going to be an hour's worth of labor charge, and that will reflect on that bike. Now the thing is, some dealerships will normalize that because they know that some bikes take an hour of prep and some bikes take 5 hours of prep, so they might charge a 3-hour time for each bike. So if they're charging around $300 per bike for prep charge, that's actually normalizing it, so that way the people who are buying the bikes like trikes and stuff like that take a longer time to set up don't have to pay as much as, say, a person with a simpler bike that doesn't take very much time at all. So it helps normalize some costs for the customers. However, once again, no more than $500 in most cases, because really most prep times stay around 3 hours to, like I said, on the very far end, 5 hours. So if the labor rate of that shop is $110 an hour, then times that by 5, and that should be where your prep charge is, or somewhere in there. But if it's way more exuberant than that, then know that you're being taken for there too. So you have to look at that and kind of think about that. Now, if it's normalized, like I said, there's not much you can do about that, but that's something you can do in the negotiation. Negotiation is all part of the game on this, and dealerships have ways of putting things in places and taking from one pot and putting it in another and everything for the deal to work. And that way, yes, you'll still pay those fees. Those fees will always exist, but it might help take the cost out of that for you as well. So you want to be able to know what those fees are, know what exuberant does look like. Like I said, if you're paying more than $500 for prep, you literally, something's wrong there. And trust me, I've seen dealers around here doing $1,000 for prep, and there is no reason for that at all. That is completely wrong. And then you've got some that charge a decent amount for freight and prep, and some of them don't even actually put it on there, so you don't actually know, because sometimes it's built into the MSRP somewhere and it's just broke down on the line. But if you can get a breakdown of that, you do need to know the breakdown for sure. So make sure you get something detailed so you can look down every list, because like I said, document fees are pretty much going to exist, except if they didn't charge their first patron, like in Oklahoma, and that does happen. There are a few dealers that absolutely have no document fees, and usually they advertise it here because they're proud of that, but pretty much everybody else does, because if they charged them for the first time, they have to continually charge them for the rest of the time, because it's discrimination and there's laws against it. And like I said, freight charges, they're going to be normalized. So like I said, look back at those screenshots, and that way you can take a look at that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what they do to you during that process of negotiation, and how some of these tactics work that may cause you to slip up and pay more money than you should be. Okay, so when you're at the negotiation table, the Foursquare is by far the worst thing that you'll ever come against. And I've got one wrote up here that basically shows you what the Foursquare is about. So this up here is going to be the dealership's money. This down here is his. And that's where they really honestly want to stay away from, is up here. They're going to keep your eyes down here as best they can. So the thing is that they'll also disclose, like the document fee, and I have $199, the freight $999, the prep $800, $20,000, because they have to disclose these prices to you during the negotiation. So I know that I just kind of wrote down some random numbers like $2,000, you know, or $20,000 right here. That's just out of the blue. It doesn't actually add up here. That's fine. It's just to show you guys what they do. So this negotiation tactic is literally to keep the customer kind of oblivious as to what's happening. So because they want to take care of this dealer money, they're going to try to keep you down here at all times, no matter what questions he asks and what's going to happen. And they're also going to do some maneuvers like holding the pin at certain times to make sure the eyes move away from the numbers for a moment, so that way they can get him going, and that way they can try to draw him away from that. So that's what I want to show you. So when they come up to it, they basically will sit there and give you some sort of a happy thing. It's like, hey, great news, Mr. Van Winkle. We've got your bike approved, and this bike is going to be the most amazing thing you're going to ride today. So I just want to show you what we've got here. So that bike is $15,000. Okay. Right now, we're going to give you $6,000, and that will pay your bike off in full. Now, for that initial investment of $1,500, you're going to end up paying $350 a month. So if I could have you go ahead and initial that, we'll get you rolling and busting bugs by this afternoon, man.
Okay, so what's the initial investment of the $1,500 for then?
Okay, what that's going to do is it's actually going to help keep that payment lower at that $350, if that's all right with you. So do you want to go ahead and get that signature, and that way we can keep you at $350?
And you said it'll pay off my bike in full?
Yes, it pays your bike off completely in full.
Is there any extra costs I have to do?
You know, everything's right here. Like I said, that will get you that $350 a month. That's kind of what you're looking for. Is that correct?
Right.
If you sign right there, man, we're going to go ahead and get you riding today.
Okay.
All right,
Sounds
cool.
good.
Excellent. Now, the thing is, he should have fought a little bit more, but that happens all the time. So basically, he says it's paid off in full. Great. You know, this happens to people all the time. They may be a second-time buyer. They may not run into this. He just agreed to paying $20,000 for a $15,000 bike and getting $3,000 less for what his motorcycle is worth. So let's talk about what this is right here. We're going to talk about the second square, the trade-in, real quick. And I'll run around to the other side, and that way I can show you some examples of that. Okay, so a lot of times when it comes to trade value, especially if you're trading in your first motorcycle for your second, because a lot of folks go into this, that's going to be one of the trickiest parts, is because it depends on the nature of the other deal, which we can discuss all those layers as well for both new bikes and traded in bikes and stuff like that. But trades is definitely something I want to mention, because this is where a lot of people trip up. Because that bike right there, we said that it was owed of $9,000, and he had basically was $6,000 given to him on the trade. So this is what it looked like. So that means he had $3,000 upside down. So he was not looking very good there. He's losing $3,000 between what he owed on the motorcycle and $6,000 and the $6,000 they gave him, and that is what's called a trade allowance. So there is a difference between what they say that they're going to do and what the bike is actually worth. So the trade allowance, and let me put that on there, equals one thing and one thing only: lies. They're literally lying to you, because this is where they can catch you off guard. Because in many ways, the trade allowance may not be what the bike is worth. Now, in some cases, there's things that dealers have in the background. They may actually give you a higher trade allowance than what the bike is actually worth. So when the bike is worth a little bit less and they're giving you a little bit more trade allowance, that means that there might have been a dealer incentive from the manufacturer so they can sell that motorcycle and get it off the lot, because it's one of those things of they don't want them there too long, because they're paying taxes on these things. They're paying fees for these things to sit there. So sometimes manufacturers give them a break, and that way that bike has a discount on it that dealer money can take care of. So sometimes you'll see that $6,000, after you fight a little bit, gets increased to maybe $7,000. And that's because they had an extra $1,000 possibly in the profit of that bike given to them by the manufacturer, or maybe not even given to them by the manufacturer, just something built into the bike that allowed that kind of profit to put that kind of an allowance on there. But what you're really needing to look for is what's called ACV. And that to us means actual cash value. What actual cash value means is that, say that bike was actually worth the full $9,000. So that means that when it comes down to it, the bike is actually worth $9,000. What they're doing to you by saying a trade allowance is giving them the ability to go up or low on that. So what you actually want to ask them is how much are you going to actually pay me if I was to sell this bike to you directly? That way you can kind of catch them to see if you can catch what the actual cash value might be on that motorcycle. And if it still sounds low, you can always use some different references. Now in the power sports world, most of the time they're going to use one of the books that's out there. They have NADA, they have Kelley Blue Book. Let me cut to a couple of those pictures here of what that would look like. I'll use Ray as an example, my 2015 Night Rod. That way you can see how they can price this. And other ways that they do this as well is that they actually have live systems now that monitor bike sales from across the nation and region and everything like that, that normalizes the price of the motorcycle to the dealer, and that changes more consistently, whereas books are quarterly. That live data is coming through every day, and that way they can see what auctions are paying, they can see what other people are paying for that motorcycle, they can see what trade-in values are, they can see these other things, so that way they can get closer to this actual cash number. Whereas a trade allowance, they literally will try to start you at a rate that is lower than what the bike is worth, so that way they can give you that feel of negotiating and give you that feel that you're fighting for it, and still sometimes never make it to what the bike is worth. So be sure that you are prepared and know what your motorcycle is worth, and do not buy the lie of wholesale. It is a stupid and incompetent lie by dealerships that they are like, well, I'm sorry, we're a BMW dealership, or I'm sorry, we're a Harley dealership, or whatever brand that's out there, and we sell it to a wholesale guy that takes it off. Well, the thing is, first off, they're going to give you the $6,000. They're going to literally charge the guy $6,500 to drive it off the lot, and that thing's going to sell at auction for $9,000. Who do you think's profiting? It's definitely not you. They're definitely getting it out there, putting in the auctions, and they're all profiting from this by getting you to go ahead and accept that wholesale price. Now, there are ways that, like I said, there's some honest dealers that will say it's better to go ahead and try to sell it yourself. And that is kind of true, because there is a saturation in the market of used motorcycles everywhere. So it is harder to go to a dealership and literally deal with that. Now, there are some dealers that literally are honest, or more honest, that you can still get closer to that actual cash value if you're more empowered and know what to do and know what your bike is worth, because you know it's clean, you know what it's going to do, and you know what's there. But you do have to realize that yes, they're going to try to make a profit somewhere, because when they buy these bikes, they do have to do some reconditioning, because you pretty much need to remember in your mind, in the background, that they're going to look at the tires, they're going to look at the brakes, they're going to look at the services, they're going to look at everything. More than likely that motorcycle is going to come in, it's going to get a refresher on its last service. They might go ahead and change the fluids out, lubricate a few of the items like the cables and stuff like that, make sure the chain in her belt or whatever is serviced correctly, and do some checks like that before they put it out on the floor. So they're going to have something built in there. So you're never going to ever probably get the clean trade-in at all times, because that literally would have to be like the perfect bike for them to go, but it still may never be worth as much as your loan. But just remember that they are trying somewhere to get you on that, on the trades. So be empowered, use an ADA, use Kelley Blue Book, use some of those options with you, and that way that you can come in, know what your bike's worth, try to negotiate that better deal. But like I said, there are still going to be times you cannot win due to the saturation that is on the market in the long run. Sometimes you may still have to do private sell and still try to get as much as you can out of that motorcycle. But when dealing with dealerships, know that that first number is never enough. You can always go up from there. But here's another thing you need to consider, and this is extremely, extremely important. Your modifications do not matter no matter what. In the books, to the dealer, to anybody else. And this is because it's strictly because you wanted those modifications, and not everybody is you. So when it comes down to it, when you bring a bike in that has mods on it, that's not going to get you extra value no matter what. That means nothing, because it is just part of the motorcycle now. You paid for it to make it yours. So now the dealer has to pay for it to take them off and sell it as stock as best they can, or they're going to have to wait for a specific buyer to come and buy that motorcycle, and that's going to sit there for a while, and it's going to cost them money. So remember that mods literally mean nothing, because they're yours. Go to any literal Harley dealership and they have hundreds of takeoff parts in the back from all those mods, because for the most part they'll take off the bags, they'll take off the seats. They'll change them back to stock if they have the way to do it, because they simply don't matter. So that's something you need to consider. If it's your baby and you put all that money into it, you're probably never going to see that again. So don't be offended when they come back for a low number because you modded it and you think they're worth all that. It's going to be less than what you think it is because of those mods. Now, if you sell that privately, you might find somebody similar and get a lot more money, and that way those mods go with that bike. But at a dealer, they simply don't care. So let's talk about the MSRP and what you can do there. Okay, so when it comes to MSRP, what does that actually stand for? And if you don't know, that means manufacturer suggested retail price. So when you go in there and you see that top line, MSRP, $15,000, that's how much the manufacturer, whenever they finish the motorcycle, says that the motorcycle is worth. Well, let's be honest, the dealer doesn't pay $15,000 to sell you a bike and make a profit. They buy this bike at an invoice price that is less, but not significantly less. With motorcycles and power sports, there's not as much margin in these vehicles as there is a car or truck or SUV. There's still margins in there, but they're very tiny. So you probably have a couple of $1,000s that you can actually swing around with that will help you out. So always remember that if you're paying MSRP, you're paying a little higher. Try to find a happy medium in there, and like I said, you'll probably still make them $500 if you even swing it down $2,000, but that truly depends on the kind of bike. It's kind of like an SUV versus a car. The car has a lower margin in it than the SUV. But like a dresser will have more of a margin than, say, a small bike like an SV or a Sportster or something like that. Those bikes don't have those margins built in, such as the dressers and stuff like that. So when you go into negotiating, you're going to have a little bit easier time to get them to drop a little bit on those dressers than you will, say, a Sportster if you go in there. So remember that when you're negotiating, you do have some room to go down. You don't have to pay $15,000 in MSRP, but you also want to make sure that when you're doing that, that you actually want to do something and negotiate to a price that's OTD. OTD stands for out the door. Whenever you're going for a price, you need to kind of look at the market that's around you. Go to Cycle Trader, go to places, and become informed by the pricing and stuff of your area. Because each different area, each different region is going to actually have different pricing. Whereas maybe here in the middle part of the United States, we might actually pay more than the people on the East Coast. Or the East Coast is going to pay way less than the people on the West Coast. There's random things that are built into these regions. But what you want to actually try to do is get the final bottom dollar from MSRP and forget all that to out the door pricing, because out the door pricing is going to include literally everything. That's going to include the motorcycle, the fees, and any sort of protection plan that you may purchase. And that way, whenever you go into that and you say, I want this to be out the door $14,500, that's $500 less than the MSRP, but it's also including all the extra goodies and fees and everything else in between. If they say no and they try to push it up, you can honestly work your way down or find a dealership that's ready to work with your number. I more or less prefer to do something that's called the ransom note whenever I go to negotiate these prices, because I'm looking for out the door. I'm not looking to play. I don't want to be sat there with a foursquare and just accept whatever they put on there or try to fight, because if they fight, they start crossing things out and they do everything they can to make it so confusing, and you're beat down and you're like, you know what, I just want to buy the bike, I'm done, and then you pay way too much more money. What I like to do is I like to go out there and research the pricing of these motorcycles, look at multiple different places, and then I literally write out a note. This deal is completed if you meet these demands. So I literally go in there with this note and hand it to them and say, if it can't be met, I'm going to the next place. If they say no, I go to the next place. I simply walk out. Don't be afraid to walk out. Even if they grab onto your leg, just drag the guy with you. Who cares if the salesman gets a little bit scuffed up? That's his fault for grabbing your leg when you said, I'm leaving, you're not doing it the way I want it. So do that, and always be afraid, or never be afraid to walk out. That's not the only deal in town. That's not the only deal in the state. That's not the only deal in your region. If you need to move around a little bit, go to the next state. If they're going to give you what you're actually looking for, you make the demand. If you're paying with cash, pay with cash and write your demand down. If you're going to need to finance, Write down exactly what you want, not a range, what you want. If they try to do this whole range thing on you, don't mess with them, because they're literally, what they're doing in the background is that they're going into the interest rates and messing with things, because there's what's called a buyer's rate and there's what's called the minimal rate. So when you go in and you negotiate the price and you've been approved and your trade is good, everything's looking good, and they've got that range of price that you signed off on that Foursquare, what they literally are doing is that they already know where their margins are. They know what their profit is. They literally have a whole list of everything that's happening on there. And they can sit there and just go, okay, cool, here's exactly in the middle of his number, so he feels like he won. You don't want to give them a range, and you don't want to fight with that. You want your bare minimum that you're looking for, and that's your maximum at the same time. You're saying $290 a month. If they can't hit it, you're done. You walk out the door. If you can't, if you're going to pay the cash price and they don't want to do anything, they want to move on anything, move on. They're not the only deal in town. You have to remember that. Walk out the door, because walking out's a lot of power too. They will sometimes call you and make that deal happen in the next couple of days, because they're going to stew on it too, because they want the deal. They want that off their lot. So walking away is powerful, especially if you got cash. If you have your own financing, it's powerful as well, because you can still get that better deal that you've already negotiated with your bank or whatever to get that done the way you want it done. So remember that, because if you go in there and you get fooled by that range, they literally, you were 810 credit score, you qualified for 1.99% financing, but the way you signed off on that $350 mark, they included everything. They gave you the gap protection and the service plans and the tire plans and the Simonize and all this other junk that actually doesn't need to be on there. And they managed to hit that number because you qualified very well, but you also gave them a range to play with. And you didn't get that 1.99% either. You paid for 4% because you bought it at that rate, and that's a no-no. Do not let them charge you for a higher rate. Know the specials of that dealership. That's very important. A lot of these websites have the manufacturer's rates and promotions and everything on there. So if you have a high credit score and you walk in there and you're not getting their minimal rate because some reason, and they can't give you a reason, it's more than likely because they're trying to buy out the rates. That way they get paid more by the bank for that deal, which is wrong. They shouldn't be trying to do that. They should be fighting for you. They should be giving you less interest rates, so that way they get you more motorcycle instead of trying to play it the other way around. So remember that. Do not let them put you in a range. Get everything you need on there. And I still recommend more or less having your own financing ready and available before you walk in there, or know the promotion, so that way when you see them come out with that pencil and you've got the buyer's order, and this is what a buyer's order will look like, then you have an idea of what's going on, and you can look down this line and go, now wait a moment, this is not what we agreed to. This is still more than the price that I agreed to, and this is more than the payment I agreed to. And you can just simply say, since you didn't agree, you walk away again. It's simple as that. Nothing is done until your signature is dry on the paper. Nothing at all. So remember that. Do not think you bought a motorcycle if you're in the midst of that Foursquare and you've put that little initials right there or whatever. That's still not done. You haven't gone to the finance office. You haven't paid. It's still in the air. You can still walk out the door at that point. Don't be afraid to do that. You're not doing anything wrong. They're the ones doing something wrong. And when it comes down to it, when it comes to these protection plans and stuff like that, those are pure profit. They only literally cost the dealership probably about $400 to sell, and they're uprating these things to this poor person here literally $1,800. Think about that. They made $1,200 off this guy because they didn't know that these protection plans literally cost like $400. Very minimal. Maybe $500 maximum, period. Just depending on the scale of the bike. So remember that. Don't go in there, and especially in the finance offices where that's going to happen, do not let them sell you on these $1,800 plans. They are not that costly. They're just pretty much well marked all the way up maximum to see where you're going to throw it at, because they're just throwing darts at you at that point to see what sticks. So they may go, oh well, $1,800 is a little steep. Well, my manager approved $1,200. I just said they, $400-500. Think about how much they're still making at that point. Even if they sell it to you for $800, still making $400 to $300 or $300 to $400 in profit. So you got to be careful with those extended warranty plans. Are they good? There are times they're good. Even the $1,800 one's good, especially if you blow an engine out during that period and it's covered. And a lot of people say, well, they don't cover these things. Well, they actually do in many cases, unless you did some sort of a mod or something crazy that's not part of the program. But if you kept your motorcycle stock, more than likely, as long as you did the fluid changes and everything's good, you're going to get that back. But still, why are you paying $1,800 for something you may or may not use? Always remember that they mark those up too. They're trying to get as much profit. They're trying to get what they call the buyer's rate. So they're trying to get you on the cost of the interest rate. They're trying to get you on the cost of those protection products. And they're trying to put all these things on there to throw you off as a consumer. So I know this is a lot to cover, and there's probably a million more things that we can talk about, but I hope that this kind of gives you an idea of what to do at a dealership when you walk in. Remember that MSRP is not the bottom line. You can always negotiate down from there. Remember, go for out the door pricing, not MSRP pricing. Out the door means that that's exactly what you're paying and you're done with it at that point. Cash or finance. Finance first if you can with your own institution, or find somebody who's willing to finance you that you can work with. Try not to do it at the dealer unless you know for sure what the promotions and deals are. And the reason being is that you know what you're getting into. If you see anything better or worse than that, you know, you look at that final finance deal and you go, whoa, 3.99, no, I qualify for 1.99, I know I do. Always have that knowledge of what's going on. Know what your trade's worth. Go to NADA, go to Blue Book, and see what you can do on those numbers. Those are published every quarter, so make sure you check back every 3 months or so, because your motorcycle will be worth less or more, possibly depending on the market situation of that quarter. So remember that when you're looking at those books. And then when it comes down to it, do not be caught in that Foursquare. Have your note ready that you will do this deal if you got it. That way you can avoid the pencil, and the pencil's a little bit different than a Foursquare. I need to explain what that is. A pencil is literally the deal with a matrix that they come out there, and it's like, if you do this much down, here's your cost, here's this, and it's got everything on the side. It's a little bit different the Foursquare because they don't have ways to knock you off guard. They just literally put it all up front, and that way they will pull that one back, come up with a new one, pull that one back, come up with a new one, so they make it look like you're still negotiating and you're still winning. But they change the whole paper out instead of like make you write all over it and get you all confused. It's a little bit different. They take away those other numbers, and that way you never see those again, and they might sneak something in here and there. Like I said, they can rob Peter and pay Paul from different pots at any time. So it may look like everything's getting better, but they're changing that buy rate. They're changing that other, they're changing something else. They're putting dealer incentive in this time, or whatever it might be. They're still, keep it where you're in control. Keep it where that note is the only negotiating instrument that you have. And if they don't want to work with your note, then walk out. Very powerful tool, and then you'll be happy with that motorcycle purchase because you're aware of what you got, you know everything that happened, and you're able to walk away with a smile on your face. So if you have any more questions about how to deal with dealerships, let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to help you out. And if you want to support this channel and help us continue to grow, remember my Patreon page. I'll put the link down there as well. And also, if you like these cool t-shirts that I'm wearing, these are the ones I designed on Teespring, and that way you can help support this channel and help us get the equipment and everything. That way we can continue to grow, continue to do reviews on the equipment, and continue to do awesome content like this. Thank you once more. We'll catch you on that next ride.